So the task is to express my own interpretation of Mexicanity. Well, it's gonna be a little bit interesting, possibly a little rare. At first, it has to be said that I do not like to make categorization, and honestly, thinking more and more about any possible interpretation of Mexicanity based not on the Orioles text El Mexicano, Raíces de la Mexicanidad, but on my personal opinion based on my own observation. Well, I don't think I even have any coherent idea at all. Mexico is not a country to be generalized. Well, I'm not saying that other countries should be, but the so-called United States of Mexico are 13th largest country in the world, and they are composed currently from 32 federal entities, each being different than others. So I'm saying how there can even be just one Mexicanity. After all, the very idea of Mexicanity is slightly connected to a concept of identity of Latin American states. I believe it is possible to say that their origin is mostly artificial, at least in comparison with Europe, where the very states are usually even more historically, culturally, and linguistically based. Even though I'm aware that this is a simplification, I am aware of that. For example, one of my professors in Brno usually says that the identity and culture of Latin American states arose only after their borders were set up. For this, I believe Mexicans, together with other states, are not unified people at all, or at least they were not in the beginning. But still, without a map, it is hard to recognize the exact borders. I was traveling throughout Quintana Roo and I would not recognize that I entered Belize. They just seem to be one people. But on the contrary, they differ a lot from the people in Coahuila or Nuevo León, especially from the Fresas in San Pedro, of course. I could simply say that I see the Mexicanity in their perception of death, as I have observed during Dia de los Muertos, and while I was reading Octavio Paz and Oriol, I could say that Mexicanity is countryside that unites them. After all, this is how Ricardo Perez Montfort defines a Mexican stereotype on which an idol of Mexican patriotism was fabricated. I could say it is a Mayan or Aztec culture. I could say it is a phenomenon of the carteles, and I would be probably right, but thus I would describe just a fragment of what Mexico really is. For example, Mayan culture may define Yucatan, Quintana Roo, and Tabasco, but it has certainly nothing to do with Chihuahua or Baja California or the concept of Dia de los Muertos. Sure, even in Monterrey, here are altars and processions of calaveras, but I have actually seen the altars mostly in the houses of incomers from the south, and the procession reportedly happened to be popular after the premiere of that amazing and lovely movie Coco in 2017. I could define my view of Mexicanity based on people I have met here and the experience I have passed through. Thus, I would be describing their openness, their conservatism, their progressivity, their liberality, their passion for música tejana, their liking for anime, their love of Bad Bunny, and so on. But thus, I am not describing one stereotype, but multiple, because all those certainly are not one person. And sure, it could be La Virgen de Guadalupe, a saint symbol of all Mexico, but I'm afraid we live in a beautiful century of postmodernism, and our postmodern historians more tend to believe That it is one of many artificial symbols to keep the states united. Well, thinking of that, maybe just not only historians say that actually. So, well, on and on by a process of elimination, I simply realized that I'm not able to express my idea of Mexicanity because there are many. However, there may be one particular interpretation of Mexicanity, I feel, no matter if I am at Yucatan, in the Ciudad de Mexico, or in the north. It is the very diversity of cultures, traditions, customs, and people in general I slightly mentioned before. In the same way as in the rest of Latin America, the Mexican nationality is mostly artificial, based on the unifying ideas of los charros, la China poblada, the poverty and modesty of country people. But despite all this, I feel that Mexicans lack of something to stand for, something which would promise them like unity, some identity, and of course, most importantly, a good future in Mexico. This is important right now, I think, because a lot of my friends call Mexico a tercer mundo, and observing some cities, city quarters, or villages, I understand why. When I hitchhike outside of the city, people don't stop to a stranger, and they are sometimes suspicious when I ask for a ride, it's right here, on the gas stations. I've got a friend who is not allowed to visit some states in the West because he criticized the activity of los carteles. My Mexican friends often dream of starting a better and different life in Europe, and some of them already did so. Very often I spot soldiers in the city because they fulfill certain police duties. And Morena, it is not even worth mentioning. And of course, there is Sinaloa, which is Ukraine of Mexico, because there is a lot of cornfields, there is mafia and bribes, and there is a war. My Mexican friends love a lot of aspects of their country, but at the same time, some of them are afraid, some do not believe in any change, and some just gaze at better options outside of the state. They refuse the very idea of their possible involvement in the change because, what can one person do against the whole broken system, rotten system? So, long story short, my interpretation of Mexicanity is a bittersweet reality of this country and an ambiguous relation with it. Oh, basically love and hate relationships, which is something its citizens feel very often. For me, Mexicanity is living in a hopeless and but beautiful country without any visible future. In a doomed country you love, but at the same time you are afraid of it.